let's get started with equations with exponents. This is going to be a pretty short lesson, so feel free to pause or replay the video as needed. Equations with exponents. An equation with exponents is an equation where a variable is squared. Okay, so it's not a 2 squared, 3 squared, it's not a constant squared, it is a variable squared. And that's going to look something like this. X squared is equal to 4. That would be an equation with an exponent. See that x squared? That's what does it? Okay, in order to solve the equation, you must take the square root of both sides of the equation. So just like our last lesson where we had to square both sides of the equation, we have to take the square root of both sides of the equation. Emphasis on the both sides. So if x squared is equal to a and a is greater than 0, then x is equal to plus or minus the square root of a. So I think we talked about this when we first started doing radicals, that plus or minus sign, and that is where it comes into play, because I don't know if I take the square root of 36, if I take the square root of x, I don't know if it was positive 6 or negative 6 that made it x 36. I don't know. So I have to assume both. So here I have my example of x squared is equal to 4. It's supposed to be, there we go, there's a 4. And we take the square root of both sides. And when we do that, we cannot forget, once again, our plus or minus sign. So the square root and that squared cancels each other out. So I'm left with x is equal to the square root of 4, which is x is equal to plus or minus 2. So it could be positive 2 or it could be negative 2. That gives me that 4. Let's look at some steps before we do some practice. Okay, my first step is going to be to isolate the variable with exponents. So here on top of the page, I have x squared minus 4 is equal to 12. So we're going to use the steps to solve this equation. So if I'm isolating this equation, I'm isolating the variable. Who needs to go first? Okay, I want this guy, so that means anybody who's not with my x needs to leave like now. Okay, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides, so the 4's cancel, right? And then I'm going to be left with x is equal to 12 plus 4, which is 16. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and again, like I said, it was x squared is equal to 16, and I have to take the square root now. So the square root of x squared, that would cancel and just leave me with x, and then the square root of 16, which we know is going to be 4. Again, we cannot forget, okay, our third step, right, is to simplify, our plus or minus sign. That is critical. Okay, let's do some practice. So I have number 1 over here on the top left. X squared is equal to 25. Simple enough, right? You take the square root of each side, and you get x is equal to, hopefully you didn't forget, this plus or minus 5. So feel free to, like in your notes or something, if you wanted to just like pause right here and continue doing the rest of the problems on your own and checking, I totally recommend doing that. In the meantime, I'm going to continue to solve these problems. Number 2, I have x squared is equal to 64. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, and what times what is going to be equal to 64. I have 2 equal factors. Hopefully you remember that it is 8. So it is going to be plus or minus 8, since I don't know if it was 2 positives or 2 negative 8s. That gave me that 64. Okay, number 3 requires an extra step. My first step is going to be isolating that variable with the exponent. So I'm going to do an inverse operation with that 3 right there. Since that is minus 3, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. That is going to give me x squared is equal to 1. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. The square root of 1 is x is equal to 1. Okay, and it should be plus or minus, and I totally forgot to write it, but yeah, it should be plus or minus 1. Okay, our last problem is going to be 3x squared minus 12 is equal to 18. So again, first step, getting that variable by itself. So I need to move 12 over, that is minus 12, so I'm going to add 12 to both sides. So I should have 3x squared is equal to 18 plus 12. 18 plus 12 is 30. 3x squared is equal to 30. Then I'm going to divide each side by 3. So I'm left with x squared is equal to 10. Then take the square root of both sides, which is just x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 10. Okay, so that is it for today. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope you have a very blessed day.